now to Dr. Dore Gold, who is a senior foreign policy advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to France 24. Now, Israel's top ally, the US President, wrote in Haaretz earlier on this week that walls, fences and firing missiles isn't a long-term solution. Now, did he read that, and what does he have to say about that argument?
Well, that actually is the philosophy of the State of Israel. Israel wants peace. All parties in Israel seek peace. The problem is that Hamas is dedicated, if you listen to them, to Mukawama, armed resistance. They don't want peace with Israel. Their charter calls for killing Jews wherever they are. And therefore now they have decided to launch this rocket offensive into our cities. Their rockets are intentionally directed at Israeli population centers. Our efforts are to neutralize this rocket fire and bring about stability. But unfortunately, Hamas continues its offensive.
Dore Gold, Doug Herbert here in Paris. You know, there's a sense, some might say, watching this whole thing unfold, of deja vu and deja vu and deja vu all over again. You know, the talks between the Israelis and Palestinians, as you know, collapsed back in April, the talks on a two-state solution. This week we had the head of the opposition, the labor leader, criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu for essentially not bringing any peace proposals new to the table. How do you get back to the peace table from here? Are we just entering some sort of like infernal spiral?
Well, the first thing we need is to have two parties who are interested in making peace. Now, Mahmoud Abbas has been our negotiating partner, but unfortunately, he said no to President Obama when President Obama came up with a framework plan that would be the basis for negotiations. Both sides didn't have to accept everything in the framework, but at the end of March of this year, he basically said no. Now, to make matters worse, Mahmoud Abbas then embraced Hamas as a partner and created a kind of coalition government with Hamas. Now, many people, I think, mistakenly thought that by bringing Hamas into the tent, Abbas would succeed in moderating Hamas behavior, that they would accept Israel, that they would accept the terms of the quartet, which includes the European Union. But that didn't happen. Hamas has now resorted to massive violence. They kidnapped and killed 3 Israeli teenagers, and then they themselves began this escalation of rocket attacks deep into Israeli cities.
Sir,
they are deliberately trying to kill our civilians. We're trying to protect them.
Sir, let me just break in for a second, because that unity government you were just speaking about, that the Hamas-Fatah unity government, which hasn't really made too much tangible progress, if any, it was accepted by both the United States and the European Union. And could you make the argument, if you had gone to Benjamin Netanyahu earlier and said it might be worth at least taking a cue from that and accepting this unity government, give it a chance, we might not be where we are today?
Yeah, but look what happened. Everyone said that Hamas would become more moderate, but Hamas hardened its positions, and Hamas is engaging in warfare against Israel. What we need to do is reestablish deterrence vis-a-vis Hamas, and at the same time, we need to have a Palestinian negotiating partner who's willing to work with us and the international community to reach a peace in the Middle East. Peace will not exist with Hamas. Hamas, you have to understand, is part of the same jihadist cloth that you're seeing moving all over the Middle East. You see organizations like ISIS, like Jabhat al-Nusra. Basically, Hamas is cut from the same material.
But
you
Mr.
can't
Gold,
make peace with Hamas.
Mr. Gold, Hamas, whether you like them or not, some people would say, is a reality right now in the Mideast. And they're not going away anytime soon. There have been 2 past campaigns, and we could be headed for another big military operation. Aren't we just back in the same place as in 2008, 2009, and 2012?
You know, just a few months ago, we were in a place where we were negotiating with Mahmoud Abbas and the Fatah movement, and Hamas, no. By the way, Hamas is not just our problem. Hamas and its Muslim Brotherhood allies are rejected by General Sisi in Egypt. They're rejected by Saudi Arabia. They're rejected by the United Arab Emirates. So why should Europe come to Israel and ask us to accept Hamas, which wants to kill us, when even our Arab neighbors don't accept Hamas, except maybe for Qatar?
Dr. Gold, let me put this argument to you, made by some, that Israel all the while calls itself a democracy, but its founding principles are, some say, in jeopardy for as long as it denies freedom and the civil rights to more than 2.5 million Palestinians in the West Bank.
Well, first of all, you have to draw some distinctions. You're mixing up a lot of different categories of people. Among Arabs, Palestinian Arabs who are citizens of Israel, there is equality. Palestinian Arabs are in Israeli universities. They're in the Knesset. We have a member of the Israeli Supreme Court who's Palestinian Arab. So to say that we have some kind of system of different treatment of Arabs and Palestinians as opposed to the rest of Israelis just isn't true. In the West Bank, there's a Palestinian government. It has been weakened under the rule of Mahmoud Abbas because he hasn't had new elections. That government needs to be re-legitimized. We are ready to negotiate with that government to create a Palestinian state, a state that will leave Israel more secure with defensible borders. But we cannot be expected to make an arrangement with Hamas when Hamas is calling for our destruction and then using weapons to, in fact, try and carry it out.
Does, Dore Gold, does Israel have the capacity and the will right now to take on Hamas militarily? How long a military campaign would that take, and at what cost?
Well, remember, Israel is operating with a defensive strategy. Our goal is to bring the rockets to a halt. Hamas is operating with an offensive strategy. They want to use rockets to hit our cities. If we didn't have the Iron Dome system, if we didn't have a good civil defense apparatus so that people actually go into shelters and aren't in the streets, we would have many more casualties. Luckily, people adhere to the civil defense rules, and we have the Iron Dome system, which has protected the people of Israel. But we are not going to live like that permanently. We need to take these rocket launches and get the Hamas to stop them, get Hamas to dismantle this huge infrastructure that it has in the Gaza Strip, and to let the people of Israel live in peace.
Just before we go, I mean, just going back to that first point I made about President Obama's remarks in Haaretz, I mean, just looking at the range now of rockets coming from Gaza towards Israel. I mean, there's only so much that fences and iron domes and those kinds of bits of technology can do. I mean, is this really the right way to go about things, given the future of Israel, and given that the technology on the Palestinian side isn't getting any less advanced?
Well, these long-range rockets don't come out of the sky. They're delivered to the Palestinians either whole or in kits from Iran. Now, Iran is involved in all this activity as well. So, this isn't just a function of, let's get the Israelis and Palestinians back to the negotiating table, and the Fajr 5 rockets in the Gaza Strip will somehow go up in smoke. We have a fundamental security problem in the Middle East that's not just affecting Israel. It's affecting Yemen, it's affecting Bahrain, most of all it's affecting Syria, where the Iranians are helping in the slaughter of Arabs. We need to have good security in the Middle East. Europe could be helpful in building that security structure, and we need to have real peace negotiations with Palestinians who want peace, who recognize the rights of the Jewish people to a nation state of their own, and who will live in peace with us.
Dr. Dore Gold, a senior foreign policy advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister, thank you so very much for speaking to France 24. Doug, I just want to put one question to you, Douglas. You are, of course, our international affairs editor. I'm sorry I didn't introduce you at the beginning, in fact. Let me just ask you, how strong is Hamas militarily, and does it have enough of a stock to carry out a sustained campaign there?
Well, put it this way. Compared to Israel, they're weak militarily, obviously, but they are well stocked right now. Back in 2012, during the Pillar of Defense campaign, as it was called, that was the last time we had a big flare-up. Yes, Israel did deplete. Hamas took quite a hit. Israel hit a lot of its underground weapons, hid in weapons caches. There was